Oh, those crazy 60s. It seems that everything got wound up and started to take on a whole new twist. Skirts got shorter, hair got longer, crowds got wilder, and it got more and more obvious every day that rock and roll really was here to stay. And with the war and the protests and the space race and all, I guess we wound up going through some pretty heavy changes. But there was one fundamental principle of American life that did not change during the 60s, and that was our love affair with the automobile. Although some say the car had reached its artistic peak at the end of the 50s, it certainly hadn't stopped growing. It just kept right on getting longer and wider and more powerful and more plentiful. In fact, the number of cars in America had more than doubled between 1940 and 1960, and that was beginning to create a real problem. So planners everywhere were trying to find a way to reduce the congestion, and the Port Authority of Allegheny County was no exception. It was looking for a new transit concept that would be so attractive that people would actually want to ride it instead of driving their cars to work. A lot of folks thought that was a pretty tall order to fill, but they were wrong. Because, although most people don't realize it, Pittsburgh is the home of some of the biggest breakthroughs in transportation history. Advances like the first air brake, the first generation of distribution of alternating current, the first practical electrical locomotive, and the first modern electric railway, just to name a few. And by the 1960s, Pittsburgh equipment was powering inclines and trolleys and trains and subways all over the country. But even more important, a local group of visionary engineers at Westinghouse Electric Company was already hard at work on the very solution the Port Authority was looking for. The official name for their big idea was the Transit Expressway System, but everybody called it skybus.
What it was a new concept entirely on moving a car horizontally.
Bill Seeger was one of those engineers.
Really had never been done before, other than in some steel mills, which is really of moving steel back and forth through rollers, and also in elevators and moving elevators.
These guys were just aching to use all the new technological toys of the 60s to create a whole new generation of transportation. So to prove the idea would work, they wanted to build a test system and conduct a performance study. And a project that big required a major public-private partnership. But everyone liked the idea so well, they quickly jumped on board. Don Burnham, chairman of Westinghouse Electric Corporation at the time, spearheaded the effort.
We had that real cooperation between the government people and private industry, and of course we had the universities too, with the technical people on these things. It was just a combination of the right kind of people to work together, and they did it.
Tom Forrester, now an Allegheny County Commissioner, liked the project from the beginning.
We were part of a coalition of the county commissioners in those days and the Allegheny County legislative delegation in Harrisburg when the whole idea was brought forward. And when we were told that the commissioners then would favor a test track in South Park, we would supply the necessary state funding, I thought it was a perfect place to try it just because of the numbers of people that visit South Park, the Allegheny County Fair itself, where we could demonstrate it to hundreds of thousands of people that visited there during the county fair. So for that reason, I thought it was a good place to start, and it was a good concept, so I supported it.
With federal, state, and local funding approved, construction began in July of 1964 on a 2-mile-long elevated guideway in South Park, about 10 miles south of downtown Pittsburgh. And while construction continued, the vehicles were built and moved to the site from the Westinghouse plant in East Pittsburgh.
The engineers stayed from the very beginning, designed it, went down the shop and helped build it, helped get it to South Park, put it on the track out there, and we stayed with it for testing. We would spend, I'd say for 6 months, we probably run 6-7 days a week, 12-14 hours a day of testing, and it was never a dull moment. We had a lot of interesting and exciting times during the testing. It was always something new that you had to solve each day.
And that hard work paid off. Bill remembers the excitement of that August day in 1965 when skybus first completed the circuit under manual control.
That was when we knew we had accomplished what we started out 2 years before to try to do. And we had times along the way that, there was some concerns about whether or not it would all pull together, particularly when we first started and, the buggy shimmied and the car didn't go very far, and we had a few arcs on the power rails, and we had to solve those problems. And but after that first couple loops around the track, that's when we felt we really had a system. We had a big celebration that night.
Then in September of that year, skybus was formally unveiled at the annual Allegheny County Fair, where people impressed. It had advanced electrical propulsion to make it fast and clean and non-polluting. It had rubber tires to keep it quiet. It had lock-on guidance to guarantee its safety, and it had a dedicated right-of-way, so it could solve existing traffic problems without creating new ones. But what really blew everyone's mind was what it didn't have. It didn't have drivers. It was fully automated.
Are you really serious? There's nobody hidden behind the doors. That was some of the comments. We know that there's somebody up behind the doors. I said, no, they're absolutely not. We only have a rider on here to make you feel comfortable, and the only thing that was being operated manually was the opening, closing of the doors. And other than that, the system was running automatic. But the real concern of having operators on was that, this is the first time, automated system, worried about people having a syndrome like they did on elevators. When they went from a manual operated elevator to an automated elevator, they had them running, they had operators sitting there pushing the buttons for the people for at least 6 months to a year before a lot of them was accepted.
Through the seasons, skybus continued to prove itself. It plowed through a whole winter of tough government testing and a summer of final field observations. In the end, the system passed with flying colors. So when County Fair time rolled around again, they finally let it run the way it was supposed to, all on its own. And the people who rode it loved it. As a result, when the formal test report was published in February of 1967, it said that the concept had worked so well that it should be developed into a full-blown commercial system. So skybus was a big success, and Pittsburgh had another transportation breakthrough to its credit. It had launched a whole new era of fully automated mass transit. Naturally, the skybus guys were overjoyed at the good news. Until they got the bad news. Although the Port Authority had begun to build a 10.5-mile skybus system from the South Hills to downtown, some of the communities were still concerned about a transit system without drivers. So the project was delayed and eventually killed.
That was a very emotional thing. And people in the division was really very disappointed, very let down that it could get killed. But it did, and really the biggest problem of all is that it was a new technology. It was something new.
So the whole project was terminated, and the track in South Park was eventually torn down, and that was the end of skybus. Well, almost. Skybus was a winner, and these guys knew it. John Tucker worked on skybus fresh out of school. Today, he's the president of the company.
When the Pittsburgh project faded from view, we found ourselves with technology and no application. And our marketing people went to work, and we started to do development of ideas of how we might apply this technology to solve transit problems. And since then, that first opportunity came in the form of the Tampa International Airport. As long ago as 1970, which was our very first application of what truly can be said to be was the first skybus application.
And Tampa was only the first. Soon other people began to see the virtue of skybus-style systems too. And then came the real triumph. Skybus technology revolutionized the entire transportation industry when the technology was used to operate San Francisco's Bay Area Rapid Transit, the first fully automated mass transit system in the world. But like everybody else back in the 60s and early 70s, even Bart thought his passengers would be nervous at the idea of driverless transit. So like Skybus, they too added onboard personnel solely for passenger comfort. But as Skybus applications started to grow, people began to get used to the idea of riding around without a driver. And so today, there are over 200 Skybus vehicles in service or under construction. Skybus technology moves over 1 billion people a year in airports, real estate developments, and cities all over the world, and all of them without drivers. So at this point, I think it's fair to say that Skybus is a success after all, and so is the company that created it. Now called AEG Transportation Systems Incorporated, the company is still not only the world leader in transit technology, it's also still headquartered right here in the Pittsburgh area. John Tucker always knew that Skybus would be a success.
Once people become accustomed to the reality that a system can be used and it can be used safely, it's amazing how quickly that fear passes. With the continued use of our systems, and by now they're quite popular both here in the United States and around the world, that fear has diminished to zero. And it's something that makes you feel good, because that initial vision that a computer-operated, fully automated system could provide unparalleled service and performance is something that's very gratifying to us to see that that vision was realized.
And now that Skybus has finally come home to Pittsburgh International Airport, everyone here will have the chance to see what a success Skybus has become.
I see this, whether it's the 7th or 8th or 9th generation of Skybus, they are going to be amazed at the beautiful car and the comfortable car they're going to see. And they will all then relate it back to that original Generation 1 or Generation 2 Skybus car. People then will start to realize Skybus was born here. Skybus was created here, engineered here, and built here.
And Mr. Burnham is proud that the original Skybus now has a place in Pittsburgh history.
And this Skybus recalls a more modern thing that comes from Pittsburgh. It is automatic, computer controlled, and it's really an example, an early example of the new Pittsburgh.
Bill Seeger's proud too, and he knows why it took so long.
At the time when Skybus was done, and it was probably 20 years ahead of when people was really ready to accept it on it. And it was new, and then it was different, and it was, at that time, just far out. I mean,
well, that's about it. That's the story of Skybus. And I guess the moral, if there is one, has a pretty 60s kind of ring to it after all. Good ideas have a way of proving themselves.